everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Indie Film Cafe Spotlight. We're back. We took I think we had a couple months, or at least a month off. Not quite sure, but we've been off for a little bit, so we decided to come back and do another episode. And I've got my co-host here, Paul A. Presenza. How you doing, Paul?
How's it going, everybody? It's your old pal, the Moo Cow. And I'm doing just fine. This looks like it will be a fun episode.
Yes, it's going to be a blast. And we've got a special guest here. How you doing, Donald Farmer?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Now, Donald and I go pretty back, like as far as being friends. We met on MySpace back in, I want to say 2007, or was it 6? Something like that.
Yeah, it was around 2009. I think everybody started leaving MySpace and going to Facebook.
Yeah, so I think it was 2006 or 7. It was that we were friends.
Maybe 2010. Yeah, I was still on MySpace in 2009.
Yeah, so about 2008, we did a Chainsaw Cheerleaders episode, and I had Donald got me like a bunch of the girls, including Jackie Hall, who became one of my best friends. So thank you for, in a way, introducing me to my best friend. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Jackie actually produced that movie.
Yeah, she did.
She went out and found all the money to make it. So she was way more than just an actress. She made it happen.
Why doesn't she do that for us? Paul, Jesus.
Well, I did this first movie with her, Dorm of the Dead. As soon as we finished it, Jackie said, "Okay, when are we going to do another movie?" And I said, I was just joking with her. And I said, "Oh, well, as soon as you find an investor for us, we'll do another movie." And darned if she didn't run out, and within 2 weeks, she found an investor.
Sounds just like her, like a go-getter.
She raised like $30,000 in 2 weeks.
Oh, my goodness.
She was like a little hustler.
Well, she's also drop dead gorgeous. So when you have that going for you, it opens doors.
Yeah, for sure. So let's bring it back to the Wayback Machine, to the beginning. So when you were a kid, Donald, were you like a fan of the movies?
Oh yeah. I became a movie fan, I think, when I was 5, and I actually remember the first time I got interested in horror movies. I was hanging out with my mother in the kitchen, and she had a TV set up where you could see it from the kitchen. So even though I think it was in the living room, if you sat in the kitchen, you could watch the TV. So I was watching the TV while she was cooking, and on the TV there came a preview for a movie called Earth versus the Spider, where they showed this giant spider in the preview, and I was sort of fascinated by that, and that's actually where I started getting interested in fantasy type horror films. Just because I was so fascinated by this preview on TV.
Did you make your own Earth versus Spider type like movie when you were a kid?
The first movie I made on my own, I made when I was 12, and it was like a spoof. It was borrowing the title In Cold Blood, which was a popular movie at the time. So we called ours In Hot Blood, and it was basically just me as a psycho killer running around murdering my friends.
So no Truman Capote?
Well, he I'm sure had no claim to what we did. We just sort of worked the title. But
what was Fistful of Pasta? I see that as a short in your resume.
Yeah, I made that back to back with this horror short I did called The Summoned, and we made The Summoned in 74 and A Fistful of Pasta in 75. Basically, I was working with these two friends of mine, Larry Herron and Bob Tidwell, who were my collaborators when we did the horror movie The Summoned, which is now available on Blu-ray in one of those sets that also has Fistful of Pasta. And so since I'd come up with the idea for the horror movie, Larry said for the next movie, he wanted to come up with the idea for it. So he said he wanted to do a Western and called it A Fistful of Pasta. And so we together came up with a little plot for that. And it just so happened we lived 10 miles from a horse ranch where you could pay an hourly fee and rent horses. So we went to this place and rented horses, and so that we could film all the horse riding scenes at this place where you could rent a horse and you could ride their horses through this trail that took you through the woods and over a creek. And so it gave us a lot of nice locations with the horses to shoot our little Western.
Nice. So would you say it's like a true spaghetti Western?
No, only in the sense that it had a final showdown that was
no,
ripped
because
off
it was pasta and spaghetti.
it was
a
just
spaghetti
it was
Western.
just sort of ripped off from the final showdown from The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We had we ended the movie with a 3-way showdown between the three of us. So we were really borrowing and pretending that one of us be Clint Eastwood and one is Lee Van Cleef and one is Eli Wallach.
So maybe more of a macaroni Western.
And then the guy who was our Clint Eastwood type in the movie, he in real life was married to a Mexican lady, so we had her be the Mexican senorita that we're all fighting over.
Nice.
So it played right into the story.
So for me, you're one of the big names from the golden age of 80s shot on video era for people like, all the Trauma movies and people like Fred Olen Ray and Donald G. Jackson and all these great movies from that period that I grew up with and loved. I always wondered, how much did you guys kind of like collaborate and know each other and hang out and swap notes? And did you guys work with each other a lot? And I mean, it seems like there was a real community in LA at that time.
Yeah, well, before I made my first feature in '86, which was Demon Queen, of course, I'd already made all my short Super 8 movies in the '70s. I made those between '73 and '76. But in '82, I started my own fanzine called the Splatter Times, and one of the first people I interviewed, in fact, for issue 3 was Fred Olen Ray. So that's where I got to know him, was by interviewing him in '83, and he sent me lots of stills from his various movies at the time, like Scalps and Biohazard, that I could use to illustrate his interview. And from talking to him and finding out how he went about starting out as a zero budget filmmaker in Florida, making that zombie movie he made in Florida, I think it was Brain Eaters, to working his way up to the level where he had made a movie, Scalps, that actually got a theatrical release and actually played theaters in Nashville, near where I lived. So I was amazed by his story of how, making these, he started out with rock bottom budgets and worked his way up to being in theaters. And then after I interviewed him, he went even higher and hooked up with Trans World and did bigger movies like Armed Response with David Carradine, and where he even had a billboard on Sunset Boulevard in Hollywood. So his story was one of the big inspirations that inspired me to go into features. Actually, I was toying. Right after I did my Super 8 shorts in the '70s, I was toying with the idea of going into features then, but I knew back then there was no video market where you could make cheap shot on video movies. When in the '70s, when I was originally wanting to go into feature films, it was either 35 millimeter or nothing. You had to make 35 millimeter movies that were could play in theaters or drive-ins. There was no market in existence for shot on video movies in the '70s. So what I did in 1976, I just finished the last of my Super 8 movies. I just finished a Cannibal movie I did called The Taste of Flesh. And so I had these 5 or 6 Super 8 shorts I'd done, 3 of which were horror movies. And so I thought I would just roll the dice and call Hammer Films in England and see if they would be interested in me pitching an idea to them, telling them I'd just done these films. And I figured there would be no way they would actually be able to see my movies, because back then you couldn't send anybody a link to view it. You couldn't send somebody a DVD. You either had to send them your one and only print or nothing. And I knew I wasn't going to do that. So I just figured maybe I could BS my way into a deal with Hammer, so that's a very unrealistic dreams, but I thought I would roll the dice. So I got the long distance international operator, and I asked, do you have the phone number for Hammer Films in England, in London? I didn't know the address. I just said Hammer Films in London. And lo and behold, she had the phone number for me. Oh. And I knew that Michael Carreras was the CEO of Hammer. So I called Hammer internationally. The operator came on the line, and I said, oh, can I speak to Mr. Carreras? And lo and behold, she had him on the phone with me like in 2 minutes. And so I thought for the first time I talked to him, I should just try to be his pal and just kiss his ass and praise him to the high heavens. And then maybe by the second or third time I talked to him, I could start pitching him. So I just started off on the first time telling him what a huge fan I was of Hammer and everything. And I mentioned to him, oh, did you know, Mr. Carreras, I just saw your new movie at the theater. I just was at the theater and I saw your new Christopher Lee movie, To the Devil a Daughter. And he immediately just turned really offended and said, I had nothing to do with that. And was treated it like it was just a huge piece of shit. And so that immediately demoralized me. I thought, goodness, if he thinks his own movie is crap, what's he going to say when I start pitching him ideas? So that pretty much immediately killed my interest in pitching because I didn't realize he had such a sour idea of his own movies. And then it soon became obvious to me that he was taking Hammer in a new direction, away from horror movies and more into adventure and thrillers. It turned out Michael Carreras was not even a fan of horror movies. And when he took over all those horror movies were produced under his father, James Carreras, who ran the company. And when Michael took it over, he wanted to make a big Loch Ness Monster movie called Nessie. And then the biggest movie he produced under his tenure was that mystery of The Lady Vanishes with Sybil Shepherd, the remake of the Elliot Gould movie. So he wasn't really receptive to being pitched horror movie ideas, even because he didn't even want to produce horror movies. But anyway, I thought that was a good experience, just talking to a big shot. And then later on, when I was in Miami and I hadn't made my first movie, I found there was this director living in Miami named Joseph Adler, whose claim to fame was that he discovered Charles Grodin and put Charles Grodin in his very first movie. And he also produced a horror movie that Fred Olen Ray bought and became the distributor of, called Scream Baby Scream. So I thought maybe this is a more realistic person for me to pitch, somebody that might be within more my level. So I set up a meeting to pitch this Joe Adler guy. But again, he just immediately shot down everything I said. He wasn't, and I told him, if you'll back one of my movies, Mr. Adler, I've made all these Super 8 movies that we shot super quick, so I could turn your movie around really quick and shoot the entire film in 3 days. And he just almost laughed me out of the office when I said that, because he said, you can't shoot a feature motion picture in 3 days. For my movies, I take at least 2 to 3 weeks. Get out of here. You're not even being, so he really turned ugly when I started saying that I could make a movie in 3 days. And then, as it turned out, when I made my first movie, Demon Queen, I made it in 3 days.
Well, there you go. You proved your point.
I was going to say, he obviously didn't know David Dakota either.
Yeah. David Dakota, tons of Chris Seaver makes movies in 3 days. There's a lot of you guys out there that do it. I can't do it personally for me because I don't work that fast. But some people can, and that's amazing. Even
though Mr. Adler's was a rock bottom, low budget producer, he still all his films were made in 35 millimeter. And it's really difficult to make a 35 millimeter movie in 3 days, although David Dakota has proved you can do it if you just go for very, very long takes.
Right. That's all Roger Corman and Roger Corman's crew. They proved it. So certainly if they could do it, anybody could.
Yeah. But Mr. Adler, he insisted that he took 2 or 3 weeks for all of his movies, and he could have been exaggerating, who knows. But anyway, after I pitched with him, I finally figured out the best formula for me to make my first feature. I decided the best formula, once the video age came about and distributors were accepting shot on video movies, I figured out, but even then it was still the old fashioned 80s where most people were shooting on 3/4 inch video or 1 inch or Betacam, which were, the cameras back then were really, really expensive. So even if you had one, you really couldn't get away with shooting a feature movie on a 1/2 inch home video camera. You had to use one of the professional formats. And then editing was very difficult because you had to book an editing studio that could do, the old fashioned linear editing. You couldn't do this stuff with Avid like you do now. You had to build your movie from the head and work out toward the tail of the movie and build and edit your movie right through in a linear fashion. And if you edit 10 minutes into the movie and find out you've made a mistake back at the 5-minute mark, you have to just tear out everything you've done and go back to that 5-minute mark and start from there. So it was very, very nerve-wracking to edit that way. And I was super glad when the linear kind of editing went out the door, and we have the current type where everybody has editing software on their laptops, and you can edit it a little easier.
Yeah,
But
you're definitely one of those guys who's been there from the transition from 35 millimeter to VHS to digital. And, every time we have this new technology, it seems like there's a new crop of filmmakers that just kind of pops up around that, because it levels the playing field and makes things a whole lot easier.
Oh yeah. Well, I figured out with the current technology that was available in the 80s, I figured out the best way for me to go into feature filmmaking. I knew I couldn't use my old Super 8 millimeter movie camera that I used in the 70s. So what I decided was I had to make a partnership with a video production company that owned the commercial cameras, that owned editing facilities, and I would go into partnership with them. And then as partners, as 50-50 partners, we would produce a movie, and I would write it and direct it and cast it. And then for their end, they would provide equipment and editing facilities and edit the movie and deliver me a master. So I found this through my friend Mark Holman in Nashville that ran a video store called Fantasy Video. He introduced me to a guy named David Reed who owned a video production business. And so I went in partnership with David Reed. And so the deal was David Reed would shoot Demon Queen and edit it. And then I would write it and direct it, and I would cast it. And David lived in Nashville, and at the time I was in Florida, so I had him come all the way down to Miami, where we shot it half in Miami and half in Fort Lauderdale. And so we just furiously shot everything we could shoot in 3 days with David's equipment in Nashville. And even after we shot everything, we still needed a couple more scenes. So I had David shoot those other 2 scenes in Nashville. We needed a video store scene. So since Mark was the one who introduced me to David, and since Mark was the manager of a video store, Fantasy Video in Nashville, we filmed the scene in Mark's video store for the video store scene. And a lot of people say that's their favorite scene in Demon Queen, because you get to see all the old 80s jumbo boxes on the shelf with all the various horror titles.
I miss that. I miss those days, man. Like it feels so, it's gotta be weird, Donald, for you to to kind of grow up with those type of stuff and that's how you started and everything. And nowadays it's like everything's all streaming and everything's all, red boxy, there's nothing really, there's no as many stores as there used to be, that kind of thing.
Yeah, at least in Tennessee, we got some great news this month. It's like video stores have been closing right and left. The last video store in my town closed a few months ago, and now there's only one old-fashioned video store within 50 miles of where I live. It's about 20 miles away. So, and there's pretty much, I couldn't find, there's only, I think, if you want to get videos in most towns nowadays, you either got to go to Walmart or a Target, but that's only to buy them. You can't rent them. So we just got some great news this month that for the first time in I don't know how long, a brand new old-fashioned video store is opening in Knoxville called Grindhouse Video, and it just opened this month on Kingston Pike, which is the main drag in Nashville. So I can't wait next time I go to Knoxville to visit it, because all my friends who've been there tell me it's just like the 80s. It's an old-fashioned video store. Of course, it's stocked mainly with DVDs and Blu-rays, but still, it's a rental place, just like the good old days.
That's the one that's in Florida, right? Like there's one in Florida too.
Yeah, so I'm really excited that we've got one in Tennessee, and then
nice.
I know I have a friend in Raleigh, North Carolina, and she says that they also have a video rental store there that's part of a movie theater complex. It's that chain that's based out of Austin, Texas. That's all over the country now. They got, I think, one in New York, and the main one's in Austin, and they've got one in Raleigh, and they've got one in Dallas. They're just all over. They don't have any in Tennessee, though, but it's basically a multiplex movie theater with at least one screen devoted to art films. They do horror midnight shows, and they also have a video store built into the multiplex that has a good selection of horror movies. So she actually told me they had one of my movies. Oh, well, yeah, she said they had one of my movies at least there in the video store. So if I ever go to Raleigh, I'll have to visit that place too.
Nice. See, because what I remember mostly of that period back then was, you really had two completely different kinds of stores. You had your sort of blockbuster videos and the sort of one that would do a lot of whatever the popular Hollywood one thing was going on. Plus, they usually had some other horror stuff and some foreign stuff going on. But then you had the Ma and Pa place that was sort of on the corner, and usually they had pretty much nothing but horror movies. I don't know if they just knew they couldn't really compete with the bigger box ones, but you could go in there and there would just be just oodles noodles of horror movies and sometimes adult stuff in the back, because those were the two things that really, really sold back then was, tons of horror movies and of course adult films then. But
Yeah.
the great thing was you could go into there and you could find just tons of great movies that you weren't going to find at the Blockbuster Video kinds of stores.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, video stores in my area started popping up around 1980. I bought my first video recording machine in '79 where I could tape shows off TV. And I remember in 1980 was when I had my first memories of going to video rental stores. And for the first few years, they were pretty much all mom and pop stores. It wasn't until a few years into the video revolution that the national chains like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video started popping up. So for the first few features I made, I was relying heavily on this network of mom and pop video stores. And because of that, there were these national industry publications which came out, which were mailed to all the mom and pop stores, which were advertising new movie releases that they could buy for their stores. And that's how a lot of those mom and pop stores acquired their inventory, was by going through these industry newspapers and magazines, which were mailed to them free every month, which were not for the general public, which listed all the new movies available and telling the video store what their wholesale price would be, and then telling them what their suggested retail was if they wanted to offer any of these things for sale. And back in the early days, the video retail prices for video cassettes were ridiculous. I mean, they didn't think anything about charging $79 for one video cassette. So, and when I made my first few movies, Demon Queen and Cannibal Hookers, my distributors advertised in these magazines, and so that's how these distributors found out about them. I think my distributor, Mogul Communications, that handled Demon Queen, they didn't do a very good job getting it out there because I had to go all over my area and all through Nashville when it was released in order just to find one video store that had it. But when Cannibal Hookers came out, and it was distributed initially by a Toronto company called Let Us Entertain You, which was also known as Italian Stallion Video, I saw that everywhere. I think it was like in 8 out of 10 video stores I went to had it. Even when I went to New York City, video stores there had it. So they did an incredible job distributing it. The only problem with them was that they were a Canadian distribution company and we had only licensed Canadian rights to them, but they seemed to be getting it all over the States, even though they were only supposed to distribute it in Canada. And so I still had American rights available to license to an American company, but nobody in America was going to want it because the movie was already in most of the American stores, courtesy of the Canadian company. So I had to wait a few years until the Canadian distribution cooled off before I felt confident enough to go to an American company and offer it to them, which was this Magnum outfit. And so 4 years later, because it was 1988 that Italian Stallion, aka Let Us Entertain You, put Cannibal Hookers out in all the mom and pop stores in America. So about 92, 4 years later, was when this other company released Cannibal Hookers as part of a 4-pack with 3 other movies, except my movie Savage Vengeance, Tim Ritter's movie Killing Spree, and some Walter Matthau the guy from Space 1990, Martin Landau. Yeah. So they had those 4 as called I Will Dance on Your Grave, and they called them Grave Dancers. And so Cannibal Hookers was released, making its official American VHS debut in 92 as part of a 4-movie Grave Dancer series.
Nice. Now, you've got to work with some amazing people. Like, you got to work with, like, Melissa Moore, who I love.
That's who I was going to bring up.
Yeah, you got to work with her in a bunch of movies, by the way. Like,
Savage Vengeance, Vampire Cop. Yeah.
She was, when I put her in my 3rd movie, Scream Dream, she told me at that time she had only done one other movie, and it was apparently a tiny bit part. It sounded like she was an extra from the way she described it. So basically my movie was her legit debut where she had dialogue. And we worked 4 times together, because then we followed up Scream Dream with Vampire Cop, and then I put her in my 1991 documentary Invasion of the Scream Queens. And then finally, once I got a big budget and had a $250,000 budget to make Compelling Evidence, I wanted to reward her for doing all my cheap movies by putting her in my big movie. So I made sure to put her in the big movie with Dana Plato and Brigitte Nielsen.
Nice.
Yeah.
She seems like such a doll. We are working on having her come on the show. She had wanted to at one point, and then I guess just things got busy, but hopefully we'll have her on Indie Film Cafe Spotlight sometime to chat about her career, and we'll most likely mention your films and everything.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure she has.
She was like really wonderful to work with, and the entire time I was working with her, she was living in Lexington, Kentucky, where her parents ran a very popular horse ranch where they house and do the daily day-to-day upkeep of horses for their clients. So she was having to drive all the way down from Lexington, Kentucky to Cookeville, Tennessee to do Scream Dream for me. And she had to drive even further, all the way from Lexington all the way down to Atlanta to do Compelling Evidence. And then when we made Vampire Cop, we shot that in Florida. So she was coming all the way down to Florida. So I appreciated her doing all that traveling for me to come to wherever we happen to be filming at. I didn't want to do Vampire Cop in Florida, but I had these investors that put several $1,000s into it, and they had 2 conditions for giving me this money. The one condition was that I had to find some small role for their daughter, which I did, and the other condition was that I had to film the whole thing in Pensacola, Florida, and shoot one scene at their mother's house. So,
wow.
So usually these investors give you conditions, and so for the part where we had to film one scene at her mother's house, we made that really easy. We just went into her mother's living room, moved all the furniture away where we had nothing to put the actors against except white walls, and then set up the little desk and filmed the little last scene where Melissa and I are newscasters, and Melissa turns into a vampire and attacks me. And so we filmed that right in this old lady's living room, but we'd moved all her furniture away. So for all you knew, we were in a TV studio. You couldn't see anything behind us except a white wall.
Yeah.
Well,
that made the investors happy, because we were filming it technically in her mother's house, so they had no complaints.
I gotta ask about that movie. Where did Ed Cannon come from? The lead in Vampire Cop. I went looking for information about him when we reviewed the film, and I couldn't find hardly anything.
Well, that's because that's his stage name. He's a very successful actor. His name is Ed Corbin, Corbin, and he is on Facebook. And he's been in some big stuff. He just co-starred with Jeff Bridges in the Coen Brothers remake of True Grit.
Wow.
And he's also been on the TV show Weeds, playing a policeman, where he had a good speaking part on that. He's one of these actors that basically only does speaking parts in major TV shows and bigger movies. So for him to work for me was a big come down. And he told me that he would get in huge trouble with the Screen Actors Guild if he did Vampire Cop, but he agreed to do it under an assumed name. We had another actor with the same story in that, this actor, Ray McKinnon, who also agreed to be in Vampire Cop, playing the banana guy who chainsaws Mel Arnold. And he also agreed to do it if he would do it under a phony name, because under his real name, Ray McKinnon, he's done huge movies. He just co-starred with Matt Damon in the Ford versus Ferrari, and he's been in Bugsy with Warren Beatty and A Perfect World with Clint Eastwood and Apollo 13 and Summersby with Richard Gere, and just one of his bigger movies was Oh Brother, Where Art Thou with George Clooney, where he fist fights George Clooney. And he also won an Academy Award in the category of Best Live Action Short Film for a short movie he produced. And on top of all that, he was married to this huge Scream queen. That's a girl that was in John Carpenter's Prince of Darkness, and in Dead and Buried for Dan O'Bannon, and in Ruggero Deodata's Cut and Run, whose name eludes me at the time. But anyway, he was married to this huge Scream queen. So it was fun to work with him. And I'm sure probably the cheapest movie he's ever done, because right before he did Vampire Cop, he had had a nice little speaking role in Driving Miss Daisy, which won the Oscar for Best Picture. And then right after we wrapped it, he just went right back into major A-list theatrical movies.
Yeah.
So I'm sure I'm the cheapest movie he ever worked on.
So on was it IMDb? He is listed as being in Vampire Cop, and it's so funny. Like if you look at his thing, it says like I guess Rectify he created show.
Yeah,
Rectify.
he created that show.
He
He produced it.
He was in Deadwood. He was in Mud. He's in That Evening Sun. So like you've had some. I mean, I hate like you've had some really good names, big names in your movies, and that's amazing.
Camille Keaton too.
Camille Keaton. I mean,
Tiffany Shepis.
Yep, Deborah Shawn.
Yeah, we did too. We did too with Tiffany Shepis.
Yeah, Tiffany's a
when
wonderful.
I was casting Vampire Cop, I used this casting agency in Atlanta to get a lot of my people. I already had Melissa Moore because I already knew her, but to fill out the cast of Vampire Cop, I went through this agency in Atlanta, and that's where I got Ray McKinnon. He just was one of the people this agency in Atlanta recommended to me, and pretty much most of the two girls that played the hookers, they were both from the same agency as Ray. There was one girl in Vampire Cop that played one of the hookers, this redheaded girl named Monica McNeely, who told me, I asked her, oh, have you done much before this? And she said, yeah, I just played Jack Nicholson's girlfriend in Terms of Endearment. And that sounded, I had seen Terms of Endearment and I didn't remember her from it, but I didn't question her. I thought, well, that sounds impressive. So several years after we filmed Vampire Cop, I finally got around to watching Terms of Endearment to check out her story. And she is in it, but she's in like a wide shot walking down the sidewalk with Jack Nicholson. And I think she's only in this one shot. So she does appear to be playing his girlfriend in this shot because she's cozied up next to him walking down a sidewalk with him, but she never appears again in the movie. So it looks like she might have filmed more and they cut it out because her one little scene with him seems completely out of place for the rest of the movie.
Mm-hmm. Well,
but sometimes people tell you they're in these movies, and I'm always curious to check out their story and see if they're telling me the truth.
Right. Well, I mean, a lot of people say that they're like act like they're bigger than they actually are, and stuff. And so, but that is funny because she can say she was, was the girlfriend of Jack Nicholson in that movie, like that's just,
Right.
And we had another guy in Vampire Cop who told me he co-starred with Timothy Hutton in a movie called Running on Empty, which I'd heard about. And he said, oh, no, I'm not an extra in it. I have a legit speaking role in it. So just a few years ago, I finally rented it on video to check out his story. I was just suddenly curious to see if he was actually in Running on Empty. And he was in it, but he had a really tiny role, but he was in it. And his name was in the credits at the end. So he was legit in it. Because Monica, her name was not in the credits for Terms of Endearment because she didn't have any dialogue. And if you're just an extra, they don't put your name in the credits usually.
No.
And you also worked with Misty Monday / Aaron Brown and William Hellfire, which was pretty amazing. I would never have expected that. And also Tina Kraus, who's worked with us and is a friend of ours. So, I mean, anybody that you haven't worked with.
I did 2 movies with Tina because right after that Paris movie we did with her, Erotic Vampire in Paris, and I put her in a much bigger movie that was shot with Robert Zadar and William Smith called Deadly Memories. And so I put her there co-starring with those 2 guys.
Robert Zadar. There you go.
I just watched Deadly Memories for the first time because I've been checking out the Pendulum Pictures packs. And I just watched that recently. And I absolutely, I know there's a story behind that, I don't know if you want to go into some stuff with that, Donald, but that movie is, to me, it was a lot of fun. I was very surprised. I thought, I don't know. I think you told me something you did and I was just a little worried about watching it, but I really enjoyed it, by the way.
My main problem with that movie was that the producer insisted on calling it Deadly Memories. And I really hate that title. I just wanted to call it Body Shop because that would sort of give you because it's about murders that happen at a body shop. And, but he was one of these producers where if I came up with an idea, he automatically didn't want to do it because he wanted the big ideas to be his idea. So once I suggested that title, he just immediately shot it down and said, no, I'm going to name the movie. And then he came up with this Deadly Memories, which is, I just really don't like generic titles because Deadly Memories doesn't really tell you anything or make you want to see the movie. I like to have concept titles like Vampire Cop or Cannibal Hookers, which basically clearly tell you what you're going to see in the movie.
Heck yeah.
Or Chainsaw Cheerleaders. So I very much like to use concept titles, and I hate generic titles. My rule of thumb is that if you're going to use a generic title, you have to be a major studio movie with huge stars. Then you can get away with it. So, like for example, Scream is a complete generic title. It doesn't tell you anything except it's a horror movie, but you can get away with that if you got Drew Barrymore and huge stars in your movie.
Right.
But if you're making it on a low budget level, I think it really helps you in terms of distribution. If you have more of a concept title, it tells people what they can expect.
Well, sure, if you're in a video store, you're not walking by Chainsaw Cheerleaders. You're just not doing it. It's just,
right.
you know.
But Deadly Memories, to me, if I just saw that title, I would be like, I'd be like, is it about memories that kill you? Like, do your memories kill you? Like, that's what I would think. And so Body Shop, I'd be like, sounds like a horror film in a body shop, which.
Yeah. And then also I found out later that there was actually several novels that were already called Deadly Memories. So it wasn't even an original title. If you go on eBay and type in Deadly Memories, nearly everything that comes up are various novels, all using that title.
No. Well,
of course, that's happened to me several times. I'll name a movie something, and then after the fact, I'll find out that the title has already been used. Like after I'd already made Scream Dream, only after the fact that I find out that Ted Nugent had an album by that name. I wasn't a fan of Ted Nugent and never followed his career, so that came as a big surprise to me to find out that he had already used that title first.
Yeah.
And then when I did compelling evidence, it turned out somebody had already made a novel with that title, but I didn't know because I don't usually look through crime thriller novels.
I'm happy to hear that you like the titles that grab your attention, because I was giving Moody all kinds of great titles, and he's like, no, not using that. Too crazy.
Yeah,
I'm like,
more
crazy,
when I come up with a title, I immediately research it on. Nowadays, when I think of a title for a movie, I start researching it on IMDb to make sure nobody's ever already used it. Like for years, I wanted to make a movie called Stripper Ripper. And then I even announced on a Fred Olin Roy forum that I wanted to do that as one of my next movies. And then somebody, for one of these anthology movies, they made their segment of an anthology movie called The Stripper Ripper. But I had already publicly announced it online, that title, so who knows if they saw that and whatever. But still, it sort of dampened my interest to make Stripper Ripper that somebody's already used it. Yeah. But when I go for really way out titles like Hooker with a Hacksaw or Debbie Does Demons, I figure I'm pretty safe that nobody's used those titles before.
Shark Exorcist. Who's going to steal that? Like, really, other than you, Donald?
Vampire Penguins from Outer Space. Who does not want to watch a movie called that?
Well, my other rule, aside from liking concept titles, I also like to have titles that don't have too many words in them. Like the longest title I've had was probably Hooker with a Hacksaw, but I think the ideal title is a 2-word title, because that way, if you have only 2 words, each word can be stacked. One word can be stacked on top of the other, and on your poster, they can be in a much larger font. And if you have a title with too many words, you have to use a smaller font on your poster, and each word has less impact. So in terms of designing posters and designing DVD covers, I think that a short title with maybe 2 words makes for the best design, because each word can be in a large font and have a real impact.
That's a good point. Well, a lot of your titles are Shark Exorcist, Chainsaw Cheerleaders, was it Vampire Cop? All that stuff. They're
my rule for concept. The perfect concept title is 1 word is a noun and 1 word is a modifier.
That's wow. See, hey, everybody, all you indie filmmakers should start taking notes on this, because that is amazing. That's a really good advice.
And definitely don't do any boring titles, because nothing grabs your interest more than a movie that you can tell automatically from the title what you're going to get. Especially if it's something that Hollywood's not going to want to touch to the 10-foot pole. Because I've always said it's the indie movies that are taking the chances and are actually doing the interesting movies in the last 30 years.
Exactly.
Yeah, a lot of people have been nagging at me to make a sequel to Chainsaw Cheerleaders, and so I've been trying to think of what would be a good title if I did do a sequel, instead of just calling it Chainsaw Cheerleaders 2. For a while there, I was thinking maybe I should call it Texas Chainsaw Cheerleader Massacre. That would get a lot of attention.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. Like, titles really, especially back in when you were looking up at stuff at the movie stores, you're always looking for titles that would grab your attention. Jaws grabs my attention. It's a big movie. But it still, I'm like, what is this? If I never read the book, I'm like, oh my god, I want to see this. See the shark. Thing.
Now that
So.
nowadays, for my last few movies have been films where I pitch the idea and the title to a distributor before I even make it, so that I know upfront before I'm even shooting who my distributor will be. That way I don't have to worry about shooting a movie on spec and trying to find a distributor after the fact. So for the last several movies I've done this. I've pitched the title first and the concept to a distributor. Only after a distributor has signed off on it and agreed to be the distributor based on the title and the concept do I make it. And so I've done that way with Wild Eye, and that's how I'm working with another distributor. I'm working with Culture Shock Releasing, which is a partner label of Vinegar Syndrome. That's the new movie we're doing, Debbie Does Demons. It's for this Vinegar Syndrome company, Culture Shock Releasing. In fact, I'm working now with two Vinegar Syndrome partner labels. Culture Shock Releasing just put out my double feature Blu-ray with Cannibal Hookers and Hooker with a Hacksaw, and they're going to also be the distributor of Debbie Does Demons. And then there's another Vinegar Syndrome partner label called Saturn's Core Video, run by William Hellfire, my friend from the Misty Monday movie.
Nice.
And they're also going to be putting out one of my older movies this summer, but I cannot announce which one because they want to have it a big official announcement next month.
Oh, awesome. Well, that's something we can
great.
look forward to.
And I also love the Debbie Does Demons title too, because that works on multiple levels.
Yeah. I mean, we've had a few people ask us if it's a porn movie, but I think if they think that, I don't think that's a bad thing. If they think that, let them think that.
No, definitely. And you've got a lot of our friends in that, like Angel Bradford, who we've worked with and has been on this show, and Jessa Flux. You've got,
It'll be my fourth. It'll be my fourth movie with Jessa and my second movie with Angel.
We love them. They're both sweethearts.
And they're both in Shark Exorcist too, right? Like they're both in the sequel to Shark Exorcist.
That's right. Yeah, because Jessa and Angel are both of the main stars of that movie.
Nice. I can't wait for that to come out. I'm sure that's coming out sometime soon.
Yeah, that's coming out from Wild Eye, and last time I checked with them, they were their CGI place in New Jersey was creating additional CGI shots for it, like they did. That's how we worked on the first Shark Exorcist movie. I shot everything with live sharks at the Chattanooga Aquarium, and then to show them where the shark shots go. So I use those shark shots as placeholders in my edit, so they would know where their editor should then insert the CGI shark shots. And then they just went through the whole movie with their CGI guy, and wherever they saw a shark shot placeholder I put in, they put in their CGI shark shot. So we're doing the same sort of edit for Shark Extras 2. I've already delivered them my edit a few months ago, and they've got a guy going through it and putting in the CGI shots to go over my placeholder shots.
That's cool.
And I've already got the Japanese distributor of Shark Exorcist is actually, they released it in Japan several years ago, and it's a company in Japan called Coma Vision, and they've been contacting me and tell me that they're putting out that Shark Exorcist has been such a huge hit in Japan that they're actually re-releasing it in a new collector's edition that's going to have a special commentary I did for it, and it's going to come in a bundle where it includes a sticker and a t-shirt and a booklet. So they're going all out for this re-release of it in Japan, even though it's technically already been released in Japan once a few years ago. So that's a big compliment that they like it enough they're releasing it a second time. And then they also say they fully intend to license Shark Exorcist 2 for Japan. So it's good to know that movie's got such a fan base in Japan. I know when Stephen King tweeted about Shark Exorcist a few months ago, it seemed like half of the feedback I received on Twitter based on his tweet was from folks in Japan. So that's when I really realized, once he tweeted about it to his 7 million followers, and I got this huge flood of response from Japan to my inbox, that's when I realized for the first time how big a following that movie as in Japan.
That's
Because
awesome.
the Japanese people, before then, the Japanese fans apparently didn't know where to contact me at, but Stephen King let them know where to contact me at, so they just started flooding my Twitter inbox.
Wow.
Have you been out to Japan yet? Like, now you have a following, you should go out there and exploit your following.
Well, I just did an interview with them for the special booklet they're creating for Shark Exorcist. But yeah, I really don't need to go there. And with I'm more or less inclined to travel outside the country now. There's all these horror stories about airlines canceling flights all over the place because there's a huge shortage of pilots because they had to lay off so many pilots that wouldn't get vaccinated. So, I mean, I have a friend in England that's been trying to get a flight out of England. She lives there, but she's been trying to get a flight out of England to come to America, where she has she needs to see a doctor, and she prefers to see her American doctor. And so she's been trying to get a flight out, but she says she's already had 2 of her flights canceled at the last minute, and she's having trouble getting refunds on her ticket. So she said, if you're overseas now, it's really difficult to count on your flights. So I would hate to go overseas now and then get stuck there where my flight home was canceled. So until they solve this pilot problem, I'm not inclined to do any overseas traveling.
Sure.
Back in about a few years ago, I got a lot of overseas traveling out of my system. I think I went to Europe 13 times. So I've been there so much. I've sort of seen everything in Europe I was hot to see. And I'm more, when I go overseas, Europe's where I want to go. I really don't want to go to the Orient. I only just like to go to Europe.
Well, it's a much longer flight, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, from Atlanta, you can be in London in 7 hours.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about some of your newer stuff, and as opposed to, basically what I would like to know from you is when you set up a movie, with investors these days, is it a lot different than when you first, started out doing it?
Well, the first few movies I did, I had to do them as partnerships with video production companies because at the time I wasn't, I thought it's going to be way too much difficult for somebody green like me with no features on my resume to just right out of the bat find investors. So I thought for my first few features, Demon Queen, Cannibal Hookers, Scream Dream, and Savage Vengeance, all 4 of those movies were produced by me creating partnerships between myself and video production companies. In fact, Scream Dream, Savage Vengeance, those were partnerships with a friend of mine, Bob Allison's production company in Cookeville, Tennessee. Cannibal Hookers was through a partnership with a video production company run by my friend Gary Levinson in Los Angeles. And then we brought in another video production company to handle the editing, since Gary's company only did shooting and he didn't do editing. So Cannibal Hookers was actually me and 2 video production companies as my partners. Only around the time of my 5th movie, Vampire Cop, did I start talking seriously about bringing in investors. And so, like I said, we found this family who gave me about 10 grand to put into that, with the conditions that we shoot one scene at their mother's house and find some little bit part to give their daughter. So they also wanted me to toy with the idea of putting Elvis's one of his brothers in the movie, because they were friends with one of these half brothers of Elvis that he acquired when his father, Vernon Presley, remarried after Elvis's mother died. So anyway, they brought Elvis's half brother around to meet me, and I talked to him, and we had a really friendly chat and talking about the possibility of having Elvis's half brother in one of my movies, but nothing ever came of it. So when I made Vampire Cop, I thought it would be better to have a star that would have some sort of street cred with horror fans. And so once I found out how to get hold of Mal Arnold from Blood Feast, who had been a hero of mine for years, that's what I did. I cast Mal Arnold from Blood Feast. By this time, I already knew Herschel Gordon Lewis because I had interviewed him in '83 for my zine, The Spider Times. So it was just a logical next step, being friends with Herschel Gordon Lewis, to then, once I got a phone number for Mal Arnold, I brought him in, and it turned out when I gave him this nice big part in Vampire Cop, that was the first movie he had made since he did those 3 movies for Herschel Gordon Lewis, because he did Blood Feast, Scum of the Earth, and a nudist camp movie, and those were his last 3 movies. And then apparently after I did Vampire Cop with him, he went back into hiding, and I don't think he's done anything since. it's a shame. People should use him.
Maybe you can have him for another movie.
He makes it very difficult for people to get hold of him. I don't have a current number for him, and I would have used him again if he wasn't so hard to get hold of.
So one thing I wanted to ask with regards to just the way that you create your movies, and as far as the visual style and the things that you populate in your films. John Landis famously once said when he was talking about schlock that if you're going to make a B movie, or at least a popular one, you had to have the 3 Bs. You had to have blood, beasts, and boobs. Has any of that sort of like informed about how you might have approached some of the movies?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, when I made my first movie, I knew I needed to have so much gore, so much nudity, and some sort of monster creature, and so we had all 3 of those in my very first movie. So I was following the Landis movie from the very first feature. One big thing I had when I was making Demon Queen was I had got acquainted with Rick Gonzalez, who had been an assistant to Tom Savini on Day of the Dead. And so once Rick said he would be willing to work for me on Demon Queen, I said, what I really want you to do are 2 things. I want you to make a zombie that's as good enough as any zombie you ever made for George Romero. And I want you to do a zombie bite, just like one of those juicy bites you have in Day of the Dead, where you see the teeth come down on the skin and you see a huge chunk bitten away, and then you see blood just spraying, gushing out of the wound. I said, I want a bite like that. And so I told him, I have a very low budget. I can't afford to have zillions of bites like George Romero has, but I just want to have one really hot bite that we can use, to attract attention. And so he did those 2 things for me, and he did make a really incredible zombie for me that had a 2-layer face. It had a skull face, and then it had a human face on top of the skull. And then at a certain point of the movie, the human face melts away and slides off, revealing the skull face underneath. So he really went all out for my cheap little movie. And then I kept using Rick for a lot. After that, I used him. He made the full body demon costume in Scream Dream, and he did a vampire disintegration in Vampire Cop, where we see the vampire disintegrated and catch fire when it's out in the sun. And then one of the last things he did for me was he did some effects for me for Shark Exorcist, where he made the shark teeth the girl has when she starts getting possessed.
Oh, nice.
So he was really a really big score to find somebody that had just worked for Savini and Romero. So that really put Demon Queen at as good a level as it could be for no more than it cost to make.
And certainly it's a much different movie when you have practical effects versus CGI.
Yeah, my new movie, W Those Demons, is going to be all practical effects. I've only done one movie, Chainsaw Cheerleaders, where we had a lot of CGI, because CGI usually is more expensive than practical. So having CGI is not necessarily going to save you money. And we just had a few scenes in Chainsaw Cheerleaders. We had the money for it because, like I said, Jackie had raised $30,000 for us. So we had enough money to hire somebody to do CGI effects. And I think we ended up having to spend at least $2,000 on these CGI effects. And then, of course, Shark Exorcist had CGI effects, but they were all put in post-production by my distributor. But I had to supervise all the CGI effects in Chainsaw Cheerleaders and find somebody to do them. And so the main CGI effect I needed was for this demon snake that is supposed to slither onto Debbie Rochon's bed, crawl between her legs, slither through her body, so that we see little bumps popping up on her chest as it slithers through her torso, and then pops out through right at the base of her neck and rips a hole through the base of her neck and rips out. So I thought that would be almost impossible to do with practical effects unless you had a huge budget like David Cronenberg. So he was able to do the whole thing with CGI, and he did a really good job. It was as good as I could have hoped for with CGI.
That's great. And I love that you use practical effects, because especially, these days, like, I think everybody tends to, because some CGI is cheaper these days, especially like with Photoshop and other things like that, blood and everything is like that. Like when I did Scary Story Slumber Party, we did the movie, The Pledge, and we couldn't set fire to a house, without serious problems with doing that. So we had CGI fire, and it worked well, I think. I mean, it worked as well as it could.
Well, for fire, you kind of definitely need it. Yeah, you don't really want to be risking burning down somebody's house. You know, when I was a few years ago, I was on the set of this movie made in Birmingham called Homesick, which was the first movie directed by that guy who did Godzilla versus Kong.
Adam Wingard, yeah.
Yeah, it was his very first movie, and I was representing Fangoria magazine, so I was invited to come down and hang out on the set for 2 days of Adam's movie and watch him. And Adam did something very smart. He and his producer, they needed to have a location in a house where they could just go crazy with blood, splash blood all over the walls, just rip the whole house to shreds and not get sued by the homeowners. So what they did was they contacted the city of Birmingham and asked various agencies like the fire department, do you have any homes scheduled for demolition? And so they found this home that was scheduled for demolition. So they worked out a deal where they could go inside, film in the home, make the home a wreck, splash blood all over the home, and then nobody cared because right after they wrapped filming, the home was going to be demolished. So that's a very smart way to do it. And so if anyone else wants to use that idea, that's how they did it. They called the city in question and just asked which agency would have knowledge of homes scheduled for demolition. Because whenever you're in a major city, there's always big homes constantly being scheduled for demolition. And even the town I live in, there's been several homes that were demolished by the city just very recently in the last month to make way for new development. So it's a very common thing. And if you can work out a deal with them to go in and make your bloody mess before they tear the home down, what do they care? They're going to tear the home down anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, usually they want to make sure that you've got some kind of insurance because they're going to be liable if anybody injures themselves. That's the only issue I've come across with that.
Yeah, I don't know if Adam had insurance or not. I know that movie was really low budget, but it was still at least 50 grand. Because he did have enough money to hire Bill Moseley to be in it, and he was shooting on 16 millimeter. But then on the other hand, he was shooting a whole lot of it at his mother's house. He shot Tiffany Sheppus's death scene in his mother's kitchen and basement. Nice. So one of the days I was there, I spent one day at Adam's mother's house watching him make a mess of his mother's house. And his mother was just standing off in the side watching everything with a big smile, like she thought it was wonderful. And so but it was very smart for him to do this bloody death scene on the kitchen, because since it had, the linoleum floors, you could just mop up all the blood when you're through. And then he filmed the other bloody scene in the basement, which had a concrete floor and a storm drain in the center. So after he finished his scene, he could just get out a water hose and wash all the blood down the hose. And that's what we did in Cannibal Hookers, the new one I made with Jessa. We filmed a lot of the stuff in this warehouse that had concrete floors that our production manager found for us. And it had concrete floors and a storm drain in the middle. And so at the end of the day, we could be as bloody as we wanted because we could just, use the hose and wash the blood right down the storm drain.
What was that?
Yeah, we filmed a lot of Hooker with a Hacksaw in that same location. So we used that warehouse for those two movies back to back. And in both cases, we were able to wash it all down at the end of each day.
Nice.
So are a lot of your films available on like Tubi or a lot of streaming sites?
I have 3 movies I'm in Tubi. I have Shark Exorcist that I directed, and then there's a movie I co-star in that's on Tubi called Chicken's Blood, and then there's one other thing that I was involved in on Tubi. I can't remember what the third one is, but last time I checked, Tubi had 3 things that come up when you type in my name.
Nice.
Of course, I'm not really a big fan of a lot of my movies being on Tubi because I don't want people to be able to watch them for free. I want them to have to buy the DVD or the Blu-ray.
Sure.
Yeah.
So especially for my new movie, I specifically, my new movie, Debbie Does Demons, I specifically do not want it on Tubi for years and years because it's coming out on Blu-ray from Culture Shock, and I want people to get the Blu-ray. I don't want them watching it for free.
Yeah.
Although it is a good teaser kind of thing. So if there was a way to do it for, say, a month, just to get people interested and excited, and then say, well, it's going away. So if you want it, you go out and get it. Because, Moody and will tell you, we are definitely physical medium people. I don't really like streaming. I like having it because then once you buy it, it's yours. It's not like some corporation somewhere can just make it go away when they feel you no longer own it. So I'm always, pounding the drum for getting the DVD or Blu-ray of movies that I like.
Oh yeah. I'm always Yeah, I mean, if I have a movie that's really one of my really older titles, I don't mind when it starts popping up for free on these sites. But if it's a recent one, then I would prefer, to have some sort of exclusive window for several years before it starts popping up for free. And I think Chainsaw Cheerleaders is actually on YouTube where you could watch it for free, but it's such an old movie, and I don't own it. I'm not the producer of it anyway. Well, it's in a tricky situation because the man who put all the money into it, that rich guy Jackie found that gave us the 30 grand, he passed away. So I don't know what that means for the ownership of it. I guess it's owned by his widow now, but I don't really personally know his widow. That's a situation we had where I worked on these two bigger 35 millimeter movies right after I did Scream Dream and before I did Vampire Cop for this millionaire real estate developer in Tennessee named Rick Martin. And the first one we did was No Justice. So Rick was the director, but he put me in charge of celebrity casting. He made me the line producer, and he also let me have a co-starring role in the movie. And that movie was made, that's the only time I've worked on a movie that was made completely the old-fashioned, old school 60s and 70s way, where you shoot on 35 millimeter, you edit on 35 millimeter, you cut the negative, you conform it, you make 35 millimeter prints, and you take it to theaters and drive-ins and actually show it theatrically. So he did that movie completely the old school way. So that was, a good education to work on a movie that was being done that way, and then have the satisfaction of getting to go to a few theaters where it was showing. I saw it I showed at our local theater for 4 weeks, and then it also showed at one of the main theaters in Nashville. And I don't know if it ever played outside Tennessee, but at least it was fun to see a movie I'd worked on that played theatrically. The problem with that movie was, though, that Rick was very distrustful of distributors. And so he insisted on self-distributing it when it came time to put it out on video. And since he had no experience as a distributor, he did a really bad job. And basically, he had the videos for sale at his car lot where you could buy it there. And he had an ad for them in Draculina. But beyond that, it was, I don't think he got that many copies out. And then a few years ago, he passed away. And so now those movies are by default owned by his widow, who has zero interest in getting them out because she's a multimillionaire. She inherited his real estate empire. So the kind of nickel and dime stuff she would make for licensing fees, like $1,000 or $2,000 for licensing fees, which realistically is the most she would get if she tried to license them now, old movies. She's just not interested. I've had a well-known distributor desperately wanting to license these movies from her, because Rick made two that I worked with him on, No Justice, which starred Camille Keaton and Cameron Mitchell, who I cast both of them. And then the second one was Demented, which starred Michelle Bauer, David Bowie's ex-wife, Angie Bowie, and Jim Van Beber. And I've had a distributor begging me to put him in touch with Rick's widow so that he could license them from him. I said, well, I'll give you her address, but she probably won't even reply to you because she's, that kind of money doesn't interest her. She's already, very wealthy. And I've even talked to Rick's daughter and tried to bribe her into getting her mother to contact us about the distribution, but the daughter's not even interested.
So look, it's not care. Why don't she just give you the distribution rights? Just give you the rights to the movies.
You can't even get hold of the mother. The mother won't return my request to contact for the distributors. I've given her the phone numbers of all these distributors, and she won't return. She won't call them back. She's just not interested in talking to them.
So, I mean, I guess would she freak out if you did your own, like if you put it out yourself?
Well, I can't because she has the 35 millimeter master elements, and all I have of them are videos. And when Rick made the videos, he even put copyright warning right on the screen, where even if you bought a video from him. But no, I wouldn't do that. If it came out, it would have to be legit through her. So I figure it's a shame those movies are probably just going to rot in her basement and never be seen again, because she, a lot of people just would rather their movie rot than license it for a few $1,000s if they don't need the money.
I feel like a lot of films suffer through that. A lot of older films suffer.
There's quite a few of them. There's quite a few movies that are in that situation. I mean, I have a friend who runs. Have you ever heard of a Blu-ray outfit called Code Red Video?
Yes.
They put out a lot of classics. They put out Werewolves on Wheels, Simon King of the Witches, They put out Devil's Wedding Night. They have a partnership now with Kino Lorber, where
Nice.
they put out a lot of their stuff as a Code Red Kino Lorber co-production, and that's given them bigger distribution. Anyway, it's a really nice guy that runs that company named Bill Olson, and he's an expert on who owns the rights to every movie. If there's any movie you think should come out on Blu-ray, you can immediately ask him, and he knows who owns the rights to it and why they will or will not license it for video.
Get that number. Get that name and number, Moody, because I've been dying to do distribution.
So
Bill is just like an encyclopedia. I've never asked him about a movie that he did not know the answer. I've never been able to find
ask him about my movie, because I'm going to tell you straight up. We've been having some issues because I'll tell you a story and you can tell me what you think, Donald. But I have a movie, Scary Story Slumber Party, and I gave the rights to distribution to a company called Lost Empire, and the deal was after 3 years the contract would be up to negotiation, and if I said I didn't want to extend my contract, that it would end, right? That was the deal. Mm-hmm. So I said, so 3 years went by and I didn't see any money toward it. So I said, I would like the rights back. And I emailed the guy and the email bounced back. So then I emailed another email I had of him. No response, from this company. And he had, was it Prime Video, right? He put it out on Prime. And so I told him in the email, please get rid of it on Prime so I can put it up on Prime if I want to, and stuff like that. And it eventually did get off on Prime, but then all of a sudden I saw it on Plex TV, right?
Yeah, I was finding it all over the place. Streaming.
Yeah, and it's on fucking YouTube and shit for free. And I'm getting really frustrated because I'm like, who gave them the rights? So I contacted Plex TV about that. And they didn't, they're lawyers, and they never got back to me. So I'm getting like really frustrated because I don't know if I have to, if
you have an address for him, you have to send him, you have to first send him a registered letter with a cease and desist demand. And ideally you need to send it from a lawyer on lawyer stationery, get a lawyer to send him a registered letter. And that way, if you're going to sue him, you have that letter as evidence in court that you made a legitimate attempt to contact him through legal channels. And then if and it has to be a letter that he has to sign for. And then if he signs for it, you have proof that he received your letter, which is, the same as proof of somebody being served in a lawsuit. And so then if you can obtain proof that he received your letter and signed for your letter, then you can proceed with court action if you want to try to reclaim your distribution rights. It may end up going through small claims court, depending on how much money is involved. I think there's a ceiling figure where if it falls below a certain ceiling, it automatically goes by default into small claims court. But those are your legal options, I would believe right now. The first step is you have to ideally get a lawyer who will send him this cease and desist letter on letterhead stationery from a lawyer's office, send it as a certified letter that he has to sign for. Then once you can have obtained proof that he signed for the letter and received it, then you can go forward. That's pretty much all you can do. That's pretty much all you can do.
We know that lawyer.
That's what I was about to say to you, Paul.
Yep.
We know that lawyer. So we have a studio in Fort Monroe where we do all our podcasts and stuff. That's where we did Vampire Cop at your place, Paul. But
right now he's destroying the value of your movie by putting it on all these platforms. By your movie being on all these platforms, including YouTube.
I like the
destroying
exposure.
The licensing value.
I like the exposure. I'm not gonna lie. I started seeing.
You need some money out of it,
But I need and I need my rights back so I can fucking put it out myself and start actually making money because we are going into distribution. That's our plan. Is
that the one Jackie's in?
Yes, the Dare is one of the ones. Yes, so it's it's in that Scary Story Slumber
Really
Party.
should sick Jackie on her because Jackie will not stop. She is the Terminator.
I love Jackie. I miss living with her. Like honestly,
you need to talk Jackie into working more. Like she seems like she's turned her back on her horror career. She needs to start making more.
She
built up this incredible fan base, but she didn't work her fan base the correct way once she built it up. Because once you build up a fan base, what you need to do is you need to be on all the social media platforms, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and you need to only be posting things that are building up your brand. You need to look at yourself as a brand, and you need to only be posting things that are designed to interest your fan base and build up your brand. Whereas Jackie was spending all of her Facebook posting things that had nothing to do with her brand, just like uplifting messages and things like that.
Well, I
So
think
she
that
worked-
was her brand. That was trying to be her brand. Was trying to do to be that actress who's very uplifting, very spiritual.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't she say something to the tune of, if Chainsaw Cheerleaders 2 ever looked like it was going to be made, that she'd be very interested in coming back for that?
She never said that to me. So
she said she was going to talk to you about that. You just
I
never called her back.
Her.
You never called her back.
I contacted her, but she didn't really mention anything like that. She just mentioned that she just was being very vague. So who knows?
Contact her, Donald, because I swear to God, she'd probably do it if it. But I think she'd want to be a producer, kind of thing.
I think the other girl from Chainsaw Cheerleaders, one of the other blondes, ended up moving to the Arab Emirates. And the last time I heard from her, she was living there in that big town where Tom Cruise made one of those Mission Impossible movies. And
nice.
She opposed, before she shut down her Facebook page, she basically said she didn't ever want to come back to America. And the third cheerleader from that movie was the other blonde. She, I did get her out of retirement to be in Bigfoot Exorcist. So as soon as I got her out of retirement, she just went right back into retirement, because after she did that, then she just said, nah, she really didn't think she wanted to do any more movies. So, and then there was a fourth girl in that movie, the one who played the punk girl, Michelle, who was the redheaded girl in Chainsaw Cheerleaders. And she actually did a pretty big movie. After she did that, she co-starred with Leslie Easterbrook from The Devil's Rejects in a really well-received horror movie that had her and co-starring with Leslie and Kane Hodder. So I can't remember the name of it, but I rented it, and it was really incredible.
Back in 2008 when we did, or 2009, whenever it was that, I think it was 2008, but whenever we did the Chainsaw Cheerleaders interview or whatever, I became friends with Michelle Gray as well.
That's who I'm talking about.
Yeah, that's who you're talking about. And I was following everybody's career. I'm still friends on Facebook with Sierra Richards, who worked with you on both.
Yeah, we just tried to get Sierra. We just tried to get Sierra in Debbie Does Demons, and at first she said she'd do it, and then once she found out that we weren't filming in Nashville, she dropped out of it, because apparently she's not in the best of health, and she said she really didn't feel comfortable filming in Kentucky so far from home, because she's got medical issues and has to stay close to her doctor.
Well, that's understandable. But yeah, I adore her too. So I adore all these women who you worked with, and I was very happy that I got to chat with a few of them, and and get to know.
To give Sierra a plug, Sierra is now heavily into. She lives in Murfreesboro near Nashville, and she's heavily into theater there. She works with a local theater group, and tomorrow night, as a matter of fact, they're debuting their production of Macbeth. So if anybody lives in the Murfreesboro, Nashville area, go to Sierra Richards' Facebook page, and she'll have all the info how you can come down to Murfreesboro and see her in Macbeth.
Wow, that's amazing. So there you go, Sierra. Keep working your butt off on there. So I just wanted to say, Paul, was there any last questions that you wanted to ask?
A million. I did want to also point out that you're also working, or you have worked with Rebecca Reinhart, who is also a friend of ours, and who's my co-host in the other podcast I do, Sexploitation Sleazecast. So that's always a cool thing. So we all seem to know a lot of folks that you've worked with.
Yep.
Yeah, I first met Rebecca right before, no, it was like right in the first year of the lockdown. I think this was in 2000. I did a horror convention in Tennessee called the Rocky Top Horror Show. So we did this horror convention where the main guests of honor were Hugh Gallagher, the director of Erotica, Tim Ritter, the director of Killing Spree, and we had Rebecca came down and she did her podcast live from the horror convention. So that's where I got to meet her, and then I started putting her in my movie. So Rebecca is actually in the new movie I'm doing, Debbie Does Demon. She's already filmed her part. She's in a flashback scene that we shot like a couple of years ago, and she's also in this new anthology movie I did called Catnado. So yeah, so I've already worked with her at least twice, and hope to do so more so.
How many NATOs are there going to be? I wonder. Like, I know there's Clown NATO, Shark NATO, Cat NATO. You know,
what are the odds that you'd ever get to come out to Virginia and go to be in Scares That Care? I think you'd be a great guest there.
Well, I was invited to come out and have a dealer table at this show that's near Virginia Beach this summer, but I looked it up on a map, and it's probably too far for me to drive, because Virginia Beach, that's like all on the extreme east side of the state, and I really hate driving that far.
Oh. Well, we're really happy to. I mean, we'd really be happy to have you out here anytime. You know, if you can.
Is that in the Virginia Beach area?
Yeah, that the Scares That Care is in Williamsburg, which is like an hour from Virginia Beach. You know, so. So
and then our studio's at Fort Monroe, which is about somewhere halfway in between.
Yeah, my favorite thing in Virginia is the thing they've called, I think it's that bridge, Natural Bridge, which is sort of like an hour from Roanoke.
Yep.
They used to have a replica of Stonehenge there called Foamhenge, made out of foam rubber.
I think
last time I was through Virginia, I stopped off at Foamhenge. Took a lot of photos of me looking like I'm at Stonehenge.
Yeah, we weren't at Foamhenge, but we were in Natural Bridge. That's when we were visiting John Johnson, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I used to go to the Chiller Theater show in New Jersey a lot, and so back when I didn't mind driving so far, and whenever I would go through Virginia on my way to Chiller show in New Jersey, I would always stop off at Natural Bridge. That was my big, pit stop in Virginia. There's another place in Virginia that I'm fascinated with that I've never been to in person, but I've talked to him on the phone. It's called the Monroe Institute. Have you heard of this place in Virginia?
Not offhand.
No.
I mean, it sounds sort of.
It's this place that's really notorious because they used to have a contract with the government during the Clinton years. So if you were working for the CIA, it was part of your hiring training that you had to go through this psychic training program at the Monroe Institute, because it's come out that during the Clinton years, and even I think during some of the Bush years, the U.S. government was allocating black ops money toward psychic research. And of course, I think after Clinton was out, they got rid of and it was exposed that they were spending tax dollars on psychic research. They stopped doing it. But that's basically what the Monroe Institute is. It's a psychic research facility. And
nice.
Sounds like Quantico.
They were getting a lot of tax dollars during the Clinton and Bush senior years. And I talked to a professor at Emory University in Atlanta who had actually gone through their program. He claimed that their program was designed to see if you had psychic abilities and if you were able to do astral projection, which he claimed he was able to. He basically told me that what they do is they put you in a sensory deprivation chamber, not like the one in Altered States, but in a whole room where you're on a table and you have no windows, no clock, you have no idea of what time it is. And they have you in there for several days till you lose touch of what day it is, or if it's day or night. You have no idea how long you've been in there. And then while you're in there, he said they put headphones on you that are designed to put frequencies in each ear that are a little bit different, that are designed to stimulate one hemisphere of your brain and then alternate and stimulate another hemisphere of your brain. And he says this sort of processing puts you in sort of a hallucinatory state where you start thinking you're separating from your body or stuff like that.
Interesting.
So they also have
Donald, that sounds like a movie.
They also have a home version of these training tapes that you can use at home. And so I actually bought the home version, which is designed. You put headphones on while you're in bed, and it stimulates each side of your brain, and it's designed to again put you in this hallucinatory state. So I got the home version, and it actually kind of worked. It actually kind of worked because I tried it for several days with no. The way that it works is you've got to put it on when you go to bed, then you've got to set your alarm clock for 4 a.m. And you've got to wake yourself up out of a deep sleep at 4 a.m. immediately while you're in this disoriented state of having just been woke up out of a deep sleep. You've got to put on the headphones and listen to this stuff. And then as you go back into sleep, it's supposed to put you into this weird state. And so I did, and it actually put me into a state of sleep paralysis where I could hear all the sounds coming from other rooms in the house, because basically I didn't go into the state of sleep paralysis till morning when there was activity in the house. And so I could hear like my nephew in the other room, and I could hear all these sounds, but whenever I'd open my eyes, all I could see was pure white, and I couldn't move. So I could hear sounds, and I knew I wasn't dreaming, and I knew I was awake. But every time I would try to talk or anything, I couldn't move, and I couldn't see anything. All I saw was white. And then all of a sudden I had the sensation that my consciousness was being sucked into a vortex, and I felt like I had to fight it or my consciousness would be sucked into a hole. And so I went through this panicky thing, and then I finally fought it, and finally I woke up and was able to move again. So that's the kind of state it put me in by listening to the home version of their tape. So the home version of their tape really does have some sort of weird effect on you. It was very interesting.
You could figure out some way of putting boobs and blood in that. That is a movie right there.
But this institute is in Virginia, and they charge, I think, several $1,000s to do their actual training, like they used to give to CIA agents. But anybody off the street who's got the asking price, they will do the full program on you, just like they used to do to CIA agents, and they'll put you in the sensory deprivation room for several days, and they'll fuck with your brain and try to make you hallucinate. So if you ever want to have a fun vacation, just take a date and spend a few grand and let them make you go crazy.
Who are you going to call? Brain busters.
Yeah, pretty much. Well,
I think this place is in Charlottesville, Virginia. I think that's where it is. But
yeah, that sounds about right.
Just look up Monroe Institute in Virginia, and you'll see where they're at.
Well, we'll ask Johnny about it the next time we chat with them.
Yeah.
So I just want to say thank you so much, Donald. This has been a great conversation, and I literally, like Paul said, he has a million questions, and I'm sure we all do. But we'll definitely have you back on to talk more about some stuff that's going on, because you are somebody who we can't talk for just like an hour and 15 minutes. We got to talk for hours, with at some point. So thank you so much. Thank you. Is there anything you like to plug right now? Any movies and your websites and stuff and your social media?
Well, my big news is that this next month in June, Saturn's Core Video, the subsidiary of Vinegar Syndrome, they're going to announce which of my old movies they're putting out in a deluxe, fully loaded Blu-ray special edition. So that announcement will be coming in just a few weeks. And then later on this summer, the video arm of Culture Shock releasing, also a Vinegar Syndrome company called Lo-Fi Video, they're going to also announce which of my old movies they're putting out in a new collectible jumbo box VHS edition.
That's
so
awesome.
I have these two announcements of some of my old movies that are going to be made this summer. And then also this month is the release date for the new deluxe Japanese version of Shark Exorcist with subtitles, which you can order by going to amazon.jp and typing in Exorcist Shark. Somehow on the Japanese side, if you type in Exorcist Shark, it comes up quicker than if you type in Shark Exorcist. But if anybody just wants to have the Japanese version, that's where you get it. And then also, like I said, we start shooting Debbie Does Demons with Jessa and Angel Bradford this Saturday, as a matter of fact. And we'll be shooting on that on and off through between now and July. And as soon as we get it wrapped up, that'll also be coming out through Culture Shock releasing. The same great folks who put out my Hooker with a Hacksaw, Cannibal Hookers double feature, fully loaded Blu-ray, which everybody should get if you don't already have it. That's the one that even comes in a bundle that includes a soundtrack album where you can get the soundtrack. It's actually a soundtrack EP of Cannibal Hookers. So that's the first time I've had a vinyl record released in connection with one of my movies. So that's a big first for me. I've never had a vinyl record out before.
I still need to buy that, and that's on Blu-ray?
Yeah, if you go to cultureshockreleasing.com, that's where you can get it. And they give you two options. You can just buy the Blu-ray by itself, or you can buy it in the bundle with the vinyl EP record.
Cool. Awesome. So what are your social media sites?
Well, I'm on Facebook, and then I also run a site called Invasion of the Scream Queens, which if you just go to Facebook and type in Invasion of the Scream Queens, it pops up. And that's a site I do where I spotlight and promote both the actresses that I work with in my movies and also classic actresses from the 60s and 70s and the past that I like. So we sort of alternate between promoting my actresses and promoting classic actresses on this Invasion of the Scream Queen site, which is named after the documentary I did with Melissa Moore and Monique Gabrielle back in 1991.
Is that
So we're just keeping.
Is that available, like the old documentary you did?
Yeah, it was released recently on DVD for the very first time by Wild Eye Releasing, and it's now out of print from them. You can no longer order it from them, but it always pops up on eBay.
What about the Jess Franco project that you worked on? Because I've always been a big Jess Franco fan, and I've never seen that.
Yeah, well, the Jess Franco project I worked on involved me doing a 3-hour video interview with Jess and Lena, which I did in 1993. And then I went to Paris, and based on their hooking me up, I did a 30-minute interview with Daniel White, who did the music for a lot of their movies. So that project was the 3-hour interview plus the Daniel White interview. And how that's finally come out, the full 3-hour interview with Jess and Lena is on YouTube, where if you want to watch the whole thing.
Oh.
However, a special, I also licensed it to Severin Video, and so what they did was they took the best parts of it and spread them out over 2 of their Jess Franco Blu-rays. So they made it a part 1 and a part 2, where they, instead of putting the whole 3-hour thing on there, they took just the best parts and then did a deluxe editing job on them, where they illustrated it with cutaway shots to illustrate whatever me and Jess are talking about. Whenever we mention a particular movie, it cuts away to a poster or a clip from that movie to illustrate what we're talking about. So they did a really deluxe editing job. And so
Awesome.
these 2, I think Nights of Pleasure, and there's another one. Those are there's 2 Jess Franco movies where if you buy them, it includes my part 1 and part 2 of my interview with him. And then my Daniel White interview, Severin put that on yet another of their Blu-rays from Franco. It's one I think called Girls Spies with Flowered Panties or something like that. So if you want to see those interviews are spread out over 3 of Severin's Jess Franco Blu-rays.
Is there any chance that you'd be able to get that released into one release?
Well, Severin licensed it, and they'll have the license for several years. So I like how they put it out on Blu-ray, where they put just the best parts, where you didn't have to sit through the whole thing, because the whole thing gets, it's sort of stop and start. Parts of it are interesting, but then the problem with a lot of it is Jess had a very thick accent, and so for a lot of it, you couldn't really understand what he was saying. So they also picked some of the parts where you could understand him the best. And one thing they do on Severin, when they release their best of, is they put subtitles. So every time he and Lena are talking, even if you can understand him, they put subtitles to help people that had trouble with his accent.
I was always a big Lena fan too.
That was a really great. I mean, I met him twice in Europe. First time I met him was in '89 when I went to Paris to interview him for Fangoria, and that appeared in Fangoria. And then when I did this interview on video, I did that in '93, where I flew to Paris, and I took a train down to Barcelona, then another train down to Alicante, where from there I went to Altea, where he was at his hotel. And at the time I interviewed him for this documentary, he was in pre-production on a movie called, I think, Jungle of Terror, also known as The Gold Bug, based on the Edgar Allan Poe story. And that turned out to be probably one of the very few movies he made which was never released in final form, because the producer of one of my own movies, the guy who co-produced my Red Lips movie, he actually was the money man behind this Jess Franco movie. And apparently he was so unhappy with the rough cut that Franco delivered that he never wanted to put the money in to finish it. So it's never been finished, but there was a time where the rough cut was on YouTube and you could see the rough cut. But he basically came to the decision that to spend more money on it was throwing good money after bad, and he refused to spend any more money on it once he saw the rough cut, which is very rare. I don't know of any other Jess Franco movie that was completely shot and then never finished.
Wow.
Maybe there are, but that's the only one I'm aware of.
Well, there you go. Well, thank you so much. And we look forward to everything that you're up to and everything that you've got going on. I guess one last question is, do you have any advice for young independent filmmakers who are just starting out right now?
Well, you have to right now figure out legitimately where your place is in the market now, because do you want to deal with one of the existing video companies that are distributing, that have a rep, or you got to first figure out who do you think would be your potential distributor, or if you're starting out, do you want to do a first few movies just self-distribute? One of the best ways for a lot of new filmmakers to start, if I was a new filmmaker and I had zero films on my resume, probably what I would do is just make it on your own on spec, self-distribute it, because it's not that expensive to self-distribute it anymore. You just got to pay for a DVD replication or Blu-ray replication and make your bucks, and then go to conventions. And the trick you should use at a convention is get the best looking girls in your movie to sit prominently at your table and let them do the heavy lifting of promoting your movie and selling the copies at the convention.
Oh yeah.
Always works for me.
No matter if you're a total unknown, no one knows who you are. If you have a reasonably attractive girl sitting at a table at a convention, people will stop and talk to her and buy what she's selling.
Blood, beasts, and boobs works every time.
There you go.
That's like if I was starting out, that's probably what I would do.
Well, there you go. That's excellent advice. Thank you so much. And thank you, Paul, for coming on the show, and everybody. Thank you guys for checking us out. And next month, we've got a brand new episode coming out. So stay tuned for that. And everybody, have a good one.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you for inviting me, and good to talk to both of you.